Hi, second graders. Today we are going to read chapter 14 on the way to New House. The old porcupine moved faster than Poppy thought possible, body swaying from side to side, quills rattling like a snare drum. The trail Aerith took was narrow but smooth, avoiding hills, tangles, and fallen trees. From time to time, Poppy saw other animals: weasels, a raccoon, a ferret, and once a bear. As soon as they caught sight of Aerith, they hurried away in haste. Poppy bounded along after Aerith, pausing now and again to gaze upon the endlessly enticing forest with delight and amazement. In low places, white-ground mist eddied gently, while above, in high trees, the early sun sowed golden sparks among dark leaves. But once, while Poppy was staring wide-eyed at a particularly towering tree, she caught sight of what appeared to be a brown blur swooping among the pines. Her joy melted. "I think Mr. Ocox is following," she said to Aerith. Aerith, however, did no more than grunt and press forward. Poppy caught up with him and then on stayed as close as possible, but with every third step she glanced back. Finally, she actually saw Mr. Ocox. He was high above, gliding through the treetops on widespread wings like a silent phantom. "He is following," Poppy cried. "Bug brain," Aerith mumbled. Then, no matter how much Poppy searched, her neck grew strained from so much turning and twisting. She lost sight of that owl. At last she decided he had gone. More relaxed, she paused now and again to take in the forest views. It was while she stopped to sniff a Scotch broom plant that Mr. Ocox, out of nowhere, made a dive at her, talons flashing. "Ocox!" Aerith bellowed. Without looking, Poppy leaped toward Aerith for protection. The porcupine, for all his bulk, wept about and lifted his tail, prepared to strike with his quills. Mr. Ocox pulled up short and, hissing venomously, flew aloft and vanished. "That was close," Poppy panted. She was trying to see where Mr. Ocox had gone. "What made you notice him?" "Poppy, if you think there's anything that's going to keep me from that salt, you don't know me." Once more the porcupine trundled along the trail. "Aerith," Poppy panted, straining to keep up, "I'm certain Mr. Ocox wants to keep me from New House. There must be something he doesn't want me to see." Aerith continued, stopped abruptly, and gave a snort. "Poppy, some creatures aren't worth trying to figure out. If they bother you, what I say is swat 'em with your tail." "Aerith, not every tail has quills." "You're right. I shouldn't hold yours against you." He set off again. "Aerith," Poppy asked for a while, "if you could just find out what it is Mr. Ocox is frightened of and tell my family." Here's Mr. Ocox swooping down. "I wouldn't care what happened to me," Aerith laughed sarcastically. "Even if it kills you?" "Well, no, but Poppy, if you don't stay alive, the only thing you'll be good for is Maggot Mash." There they are done. As they traveled farther, Poppy noticed that the trees were growing less dense. There were greater varieties of flowers, too. As the brightness intensified, Poppy guessed that they were reaching the northern limits of the forest. "Aerith," she said, "when we get out of the woods, where will we be? First there's a dirt road and an old barn, then a field of corn. Beyond the field is some low grass, then buildings where people live. There's also a new big barn. That's for chickens." "What are people like?" Poppy asked. Other than pictures in the magazines back home, she'd never actually seen any humans. "They don't bother me." "Do they dance a lot?" "What's dancing?" "It's gliding, swirling, dipping, and sliding with someone you like." "You're strange," the porcupine said. "Now don't try to distract me. On the short grass far from the cornfield is the salt lick. You figured out a way to get it for me yet?" "Aerith, I haven't seen it," Poppy answered. "It's beautiful, Poppy," Aerith murmured. "It's really beautiful." They had reached the northern edge of Dimwood Forest. Beyond the last of the trees, Poppy saw a dirt road. Even further was a dilapidated barn, smaller than Grey House and considerably older. It stood on the edge of the field, leaning over slightly. The field itself was full of tall stalks bearing plump and tasseled ears of corn. Tossed by a gentle breeze, row upon row rustled and whispered with heavy ripeness. Aerith trotted across the dirt road. "Come on, move it," the porcupine scolded once he looked back and saw Poppy on the other side. "I'm checking for Ocox," Poppy called across since the owl's one attempt to grab her, she had not seen him. Deciding that he was either gone or hiding, she darted across the dirt road and rejoined Aerith. "Let's go," the porcupine cried. He plunged into the cornfield, beating his way through the stiff stalks. Poppy paused now and again in his wake to snack on fallen corn, which lay about in great quantity. Compared with the fallow fields the mice scoured near Grey House, the profusion of food here was a marvel. Back home, the food for the family had access to took long hours to find, and there wasn't much of it. Here was food enough to feed a family twice their size. Was it this rich field that Mr. Ocox wished to hide? Did he want her family to go hungry? All that searching for food in the open did make them more vulnerable. There, Aerith cried when they finally burst through the far side of the cornfield. Look! Poppy sat up. Before her was a neatly cropped grass lawn. Not far from them stood a smooth, shiny pole as high as a cornstalk. It was capped by a large block of white salt. Isn't that something? Aerith whispered. Poppy glanced at her friend. He was drooling. Now that Poppy could see what she had promised to bring Aerith, her heart sank. How in the world would she be able to do it? It was perfectly clear that even if she could manage to get the salt off the pole, it was too huge for her to carry. The problem itself was too huge to carry. With a sigh, Poppy looked further. Beyond the salt lick was a white house. It bore some resemblance to Grey House, but its paint was bright and its windows were newly curtained, signs that suggested that people were living there. Was this what Mr. Ocox didn't want them to know about? Poppy turned to the left and saw a red barn. It was considerably larger than the house, but only had a few windows. The roof was highly pitched and covered with a sheet of metal. At the front end of the barn, the roof jutted out to form a hood. Poppy gasped. Sitting right below the overhang near a large closed window was an owl. An owl twice the size of Mr. Ocox.